Greetings. My name is Nathaniel Williams. I am a fourth-year PhD student in the Urban Education Studies program at Indiana University. I come to you in this capacity as a result of community organizations asking for my help in looking at the NEO plan, which is an initiative out of the mayor's office to change the landscape of education in the city of Indianapolis. I also come to you in this capacity slightly out of fear that this truth may be silenced in some way, but I'm still going to speak the truth. And to this NEO plan, please don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining. The Neighborhoods of Education Opportunity, or NEO, was originally submitted to Bloomberg, a part of this competition from cities across the nation. It was actually one of 20 finalists out of 305 proposals for a top prize of $5 million. They did have honorable mention for, I think, $1 million. NEO seeks to create 30,000 high-quality seats. NEO's foundation, so this whole initiative, is based upon flawed metrics. It's based upon Indiana's A to F letter grade scale associated with schools. The NEO plan or its partners never discussed in any length to why we actually switched from the AYP framework out of No Child Left Behind to the A to F scale, i.e. If you look at the two wealthiest districts in the state who petitioned for an alternative scale. But I'm not going to unpack that. But I keep referring to this NEO plan. Actually, there's two versions floating around. There is this, I guess, executive summary that the mayor's office is touting as the actual NEO plan. But I received a different version of the NEO plan, what I would call the full-out version. This NEO plan that the mayor's office is suggesting is the full NEO plan is like an 8-page document with a couple slides and a couple sentences on it. The document that I received is a 63-page document with a lot more information, as well as what's alarming about this document that I have, it is a draft form, but who is actually making the comments on this draft, as well as, excuse me, as well as who is actually authoring this plan. So, getting back to NEO and its foundation, a lot of this report is based upon an IFF report, Montrust report, as well as Stanford Children's analysis of schools within the city. But I think before we get to that, I think that these initiatives from this particular group of folks, the language is so inappropriate and so insensitive to this community, and I think communities in general. The IFF report, as well as the NEO plan, uses very impersonal and business language to talk about our kids. If you get a chance to check out the IFF report, it talks about service gap, demand, supply, performing capacity, seats. I mean, these are our children. They're not widgets. They're not something that you construct. These are our babies. And the language is very cold and just gives off a very bad vibe. Additionally, throughout conversations and community forums, as well as the report itself, the report refers to, and its advocators report to studies and research, but it's not really research. And it's continuously misrepresenting the data. This is an actual excerpt from the full version of the NEO plan, or alleged full version of the NEO plan. According to the preliminary ISTEP results for 2012, which is a state exam, Indianapolis mayor-sponsored charter schools slightly outperformed other schools in Indianapolis and significantly outperformed the city's largest school district, i.e. Indianapolis Public Schools. However, for a moment, significantly outperformed, I would love to know what the p-value is of whatever analysis or just jargon that they just thrown out there. But also, this is just bad research. Did the author account for teacher-student ratio, resources at the school, history of the city, or the education level or SES level of parents who actually send their kids to charter schools? Additionally, throughout the NEO plan, as well as some of the reports that support it, not once do they discuss one thing that researchers continue to have to, I guess, negotiate around or have to discuss is the limitations of self-selection. Just by a parent selecting to put their kid into a charter school versus a traditional public school adds a whole nother level of dynamics that one is not even addressed, let alone talked about in any of these reports or research they so-call it. NEO's metric. It is based out of analysis for Stanford Children, which Stanford Children is a reform group that was brought by the Mind Trust, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But this is how they frame high-quality seats, which is just part of this sophisticated vocabulary to talk about our kids in a very obscure way. But they have three tenets for their I guess, analysis or how they define high-quality seats: proficiency on state exam, median growth percentile, and college and career readiness, which logically isn't too flawed. However, there is mountains of research about the inability of high-stakes tests to actually capture a student's ability. And this is just a couple of resources. You can do a Google Scholar search on this and you'll find mountains of this stuff. But there's existing evidence to suggest that high-stakes exams result in little increase in learning among students. It gets back to this rote memorization that's just regurgitated to an exam. So you're not really learning anything. You're not developing any critical skills. But like I said, that's kind of a proven argument. The second, I guess, part of their analysis, or part of their definition of high quality seats, median growth percentile. It briefly gives a two sentence about this, but I am completely lost and I want to know what these benchmarks that they are referring to. I just really don't know. I really don't know about this one. And lastly, it talks about college and career readiness, which is something that definitely I think all parents like. However, to frame this, they use the AP and IB scores, which is the Advanced Placement and International Black Laureate exam. So basically, Stanford Children used a percentage of graduates who passed the AP or IB exam. But one, I think that's a good idea to have some type of college or career readiness metrics based upon the state. However, never does it account for who's actually taking this test or the research behind tracking white students into AP and black students out of AP courses. Additionally, it never talks about historically what AP courses were designed for and whom they were designed for. Once again, this plan, the NEO plan, talks about high quality seats, but it's not high quality research. Out of this alleged full version of the NEO plan, which was still in draft form, it had 93 citations, but they only represented one particular perspective of education. It was full of nothing but policy briefs from advocacy groups, which I am not knocking. Concept papers, white papers, can be a very good, useful, user-friendly tool for policymakers, parents. However, you are almost guaranteed this narrative, not all the time, but you're almost guaranteed this narrative that can be very susceptible to a subjective view or a biased view. Additionally, and one way that in research you get around that is you have peer review. So you have peers or colleagues look at your research, critique it, give you suggestions about, well, maybe you should account for this. Maybe you need to change your analysis, or maybe add this covariate to look at within between variables. You do all this to self-check yourself. It's a way of preventing bias. But there's not a single peer review article from any respected journal in the entire report. So like I said, high quality seats, but there's no high quality research. There's not a lot of high quality research to support this plan. Um, give an example of some of the things this plan suggests or claims. It says research is clear. This is an excerpt from the full out version. Research is clear that high quality education options are by far the most important factor in ensuring students have a positive long-term outcomes. That sounds pretty logical. However, what research are you referring to? And what research specifically speaks to options and that being the most important factor in ensuring these students have a positive long-term outcomes? I have to disagree because I've seen a lot of research that talks about student-teacher ratio, racial composition, resources, poverty. There's a magnitude of other things that, or a host of other things that go into positive long-term outcomes than just high-quality education options. These next couple slides are referring to excerpts, or I'm sorry, referring to topics within the longer version of this alleged NEO plan under the heading, Failing Schools Have a Catastrophic Impact on Our Neighborhoods and City. That title in itself is deficit in orientation. You're putting the blame on the schools and saying that all the side effects, crime, whatever, is just a result of the school. However, not in this single report or this plan or the reports that support it do they actually interrogate the conditions that made the school a failing school, or interrogate why those reasons play out. It's almost as if they're framing schools as these incubators of change that are completely autonomous from the disparities and equities of the world, when most people with common sense would disagree with that. The disparities, the disenfranchisement of marginalized groups, these things are just magnified in schools. They're just a mirror of what goes on in the workplace, on the site. So just framing that is just horrible. But much of this section is discussing the flight of, I'm trying to remember how they framed it, is discussing the flight of the middle class to the suburbs, which they have done a good job of just saying, flat out, white folks leaving, white flight, that's what it is. The creative class leaving. They try to cushion that with language speaking to families with young children and seeking new education opportunities. Jason Clough, Deputy Mayor of Education, even said in open forum that the main reason why people leave the city is because of education. Not completely true. As well as the plan and the conversations around it frame this flight as some new phenomenon. Flight in the city of Indianapolis and flight in general is a historical phenomenon that happened over 60 years ago. So if you really want to look at why people leave, you need to go back to the genesis of this phenomenon and look at the research that talks about that. So looking back, Frey, 1979, did a great job. It was a multivariate analysis that studied racial and non-racial causes for flight, and it was based upon a similar city to Indianapolis. And more or less what they found was that factors related to race had to do with the percentage of black folks living in the city, school desegregation, racial disturbance. So specifically, if you look back to the late 50s, 60s, there was race riots and stuff like that. So these were the most race-related common factors why people left. When controlling for race and looking at other factors, a lot had to do with the tax burden, city crime, and mobility. So you had more construction of highways so folks could easily come to the city and leave, which is a whole nother conversation that NEO plan of the mayor's office has never really addressed, of why we have particular highways going through particular neighborhoods, or why the proposed rail line goes through certain neighborhoods and doesn't go through certain neighborhoods. But none of these factors, from a historical standpoint, speak to education. So the whole idea of framing this as why white people left here, or why the middle class left the city, because there is some black flight, but not to the level of white flight. Why folks left was about education. That's not true. This is a quadrant I created from the east side of Indianapolis, and I apologize if you can't see. But what I did was I held a quadrant still, or held a quadrant in place over a 60-year period to look at racial composition shifts through those neighborhoods. And what we found, or what I found, was that starting in 1950, there was a slight increase in white urban population, but between 1960 and 1970, so race riots, deseg, 1968, within the city of Indianapolis, a larger percent of blacks moving into the city, you had an immediate decline of the white urban population, as well as you've seen this white suburban influx, as well as it just correlates. There's a positive connection between the black urban population, which definitely paints a totally different picture than what the Neo plan is suggesting. And in all honesty, for real, flight is way more complex than school quality. And it's not simply, we fix the schools, then we're going to have the creative white class come back and move back to the city. That's not it. This is an excerpt from, like I said, the alleged long version of the Neo plan. As the entire system improves, every kid, regardless of circumstances, will get an excellent education. Families with school-aged children that otherwise would have left the city will stay. And we will see residents in the suburbs who want to live in the city more back, misspelled, some because the best schools for their children are in Indianapolis. What research supports that idea? And that's a pretty big leap for a plan that could cost up to $600 million. So, apart from all the flaws of the plan, which they do have some good suggestions, my major concern surrounds the author and the intent of the people behind the plan. Like I said, the alleged document that I have alleges that the document that I have has David Harris's notes. David Harris is the CEO and founder of Mind Trust, former, I wasn't deputy or mayor, he was deputy of education, I think it was a different title, under the former mayor Bart Peterson. But I really want to ask, what is your intent? What is your role and authority on this plan? From my understanding of how this plan has been articulated to the audience, to Bloomberg, to the community, is that this is from the mayor's office. So why do I have a draft copy that has a lot of inserts and a lot of edits from a partner, a non-public official who is more or less orchestrating a plan from a public office that affects our community? So what is the intent of Mind Trust? What is the intent of these organizations and companies behind the Mind Trust? So highlighting some of these things from the larger document. These headings are the headings from the document, and under the heading, Our City's Current Challenges Do Not Define Our Future. The Neo author. Speaking of the Neo author, I simply asked in a community meeting who authored this plan. They said nothing. No one spoke. However, at the bottom of this document, it says public impact for Mayor Greg Ballard draft. Public Impact is out of North Carolina, which they source 1 million times. Public Impact is an ever-formed group, and from my understanding, could be incorrect, but Public Impact is the same people who authored the Mind Trust plan, which is a plan that the Mind Trust put out a year or so ago that more or less was not well accepted, and a lot of holes were poked into it. So to me, this just seems like a sophisticated version of that, and it's being orchestrated by someone who is not a public official, but just masked as something that is coming from a public office. So the Neo author And then there's comments in regards to this particular statement. It says the steering committee is looking across the country, and the steering committee that it refers to is the NEOPlan's partners, is looking across the country to other cities attempting large-scale education reform to identify the critical components leading to high-quality seats. DH wrote, I think it is important to leave people with the impression that we know a lot about high-quality seats because of the charter work. So you really don't know a lot about high-quality seats. Under the heading Developing New High-Performing School Options, the NEO author writes, charter schools, district schools, and private schools all have roles to play in expanding access to high-performing school options for Indianapolis children. This is DH wrote in comment, are we worried that all the private school talk may confuse people given that privates aren't directly part of the plan to launch new schools, nor will the talent we recruit go into privates? This brings me to another problem that I have with this plan, and almost a conflict of interest. One, so the plan is just to launch new schools, but also recruit talent. The Mind Trust touts the fact that they brought TFA, which is Teach for America, to Indiana. TFA, as well as in this long plan, highlights the fact that the majority of their fellows go to charter schools. But the deputy mayor and many of the folks in the mayor's office come from TFA. So here's a former employer that's fiscally benefiting from the plan, which makes sense that they're one of the partners of this steering committee. But that sounds like a conflict of interest. If you intend on launching new schools, you must close old schools, and not one single point does this plan ever talk about that. Still under the heading Developing New High-Performing School Options, the NEO author wrote, in order to maintain a high bar for quality, city and states must be selective not only in which schools they authorize, but also in number of authorizers engaged in reform efforts. Excellent. That is an excellent idea. Sounds logical. Yeah, you need a lot of oversight. You should be selective about who can authorize a charter. But DH wrote in response to this sentence, why add this, given it is a weakness for us? So, who is us? Is that the Mind Trust, the steering committee, which is the partners? And why wouldn't you want more selectivity, more oversight on who can actually create schools or give charters to schools or to folks? And does this weakness speak to the authorizer organization that the NEO plan is calling for? In this version of this long alleged version of the NEO plan, DH inserted, so through track changes you can see what they actually inserted. And it says, finally, the NEO Steering Committee plans to create a separate 50C13 with minimum staff to support the organizations executing on various facets of the plan and holding them accountable for their performance. That sounds like an authorizer. Sounds like the technical work that authorizer or sponsor would provide. Countless times the mayor's office, Stanford Children, and other partners have denied that they're not trying to create this, but in this alleged form of the plan, they are asking for something that sounds very similar to a sponsor organization. Additionally, this is very problematic because they try to cushion this with minimum staff. As well as the Mind Trust has come before the community and said that we're a small organization, but you have millions and millions of dollars behind you. When I think of a small non-for-profit organization, I think of a church on the corner, not an organization that can raise $18 million in 13 months. Last one, under our theory of change, NEO author with DH inserts or corrections, so DH made some edits. NEO is a plan to ensure every student has access to a high quality seat, which to most people sounds like a good idea. And every neighborhood has a great school. Yeah, sounds good. This ambitious goal will be achieved by creating a greater supply of high quality seats. Okay. DH wrote, I know we talk about seats, but I think it is confusing. Wouldn't it be clearer to say we are launching great new schools? So the whole intent about this is just launching new schools, which would play into your agenda of your organization, other ed reformers, the other organizations that you bring, as well as TFA, who would benefit from having more opportunities to send their fellows into these schools. So, real quick overview. If the plan is from the mayor's office and or from the mayor's office, why is allegedly David Harris's notes all over this? Mayor David no longer works for the mayor's office. He is a private individual, even though he works for a non-profit organization. He's still not a public official. Why is his input so large on this document? Once again, NEO does not talk about what it would do with the so-called failing schools. NEO was authored by an out-of-state education reform group. Simply, why wasn't this report written by someone within house, within state? Why wasn't there RFPs, a call for RFPs to bring input to this plan? And simply, why wasn't the community's voice? Why were there no voice of teachers, of students, of parents? Now, they would like to explain this by saying they had the what's possible conversations throughout the city where they had a high number of folks come out and give their input. That was just all a parade to show that, oh, we have the community's voice. But a lot of the complaints from those discussions was that the questions were very scriptive. They were almost leading to the point that you would only, oh, would you like high quality seats in your school? Most people say, yeah, but what does that really mean? There was no real dialogue, no real effort. This was a top-down initiative. It wasn't from the community, it was for the community. And also, there needs to be a real investigation into the mayor's office on the basis of conflict of interest. You have too many people who have a very particular perspective, which is, that's fine, you have that in most cases. But when your former employee of some of your spouses, or former employee of some of your spouses, fiscally benefits from a plan and initiative that you're trying to place into the city, that to me raises a couple of eyebrows. As well as, what is the role of David Harris in the mayor's office? So, and then simply, why the $600 million, why wouldn't some of this money be spent to do professional development for schools that are already in existence? One question that the community keeps asking, which is, I think, is an excellent question, if charter schools are so good, so these great new schools that they're proposing are so great, why are the majority of these schools in Center Township? Why do we not see charter schools in Center Grove, Hamilton, which are very wealthy school districts, you know? But no one can really answer that question. So I'm simply asking, where's the money? There's a lot of private interest in this plan, and they're for-profit companies. I'm not knocking them. But let's follow the money. And it seems like, by just looking at who are the players, and who are the players, or who are the people controlling players, all roads seem to end at Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly partnered with the Mind Trust to raise $18 million in 13 months. That's like United Way status. Like, I've never heard of that before. Eli Lilly has had a prominent presence on the board for Mind Trust. So you think about who's connected to the Mind Trust, or who's connected to Eli Lilly. Former Mayor Bart Peterson, which is a president or chair of Mind Trust. Spouse of the former superintendent of instruction, who after scrutiny of conflict of interest left Marion County, or left Marion University. Eli Lilly picked her up. Spouse of the deputy mayor of education, former TFA alum, which I'm suggesting this is a conflict of interest. Eli Lilly picked her up. Eli Lilly gave $5,000 to Ballard's campaign. As well as there's Senator Dennis Cruz, who got $3,500 from these ed reform groups. But when I looked up their 501c13 stuff, they all ended at the exact same address, which is very suspicious. I'm not saying that private entities have no role to play, or no role to play in education. That's not the truth. Actually, from a historical standpoint, private or industrial companies have had a role in education since the institutionalized form of public education. Simply, public education came from the private sector. Great resources to look up. Private-driven education. It is problematic when the children are not the driving force for change. You have particular community and private interests, but it's just from the outside looking in, it's like helping children, assisting children in their academic development is a byproduct of having their company CEO or top officials live downtown that are closer to my company. Or you have a developer who just happens to build schools, be a partner because definitely they want some insight into launching these new schools that they're trying to create or revamping these old schools. And I'm not saying that all corporate dollars are bad. However, you need to interrogate and question those dollars and what is the intent behind them. The director of charter schools said in a closed-door meeting that when he was working for TFA that if someone gave him a check for $1 million, he wouldn't worry about who it came from. I would. And education should be an intersection of all these interests. Like I said, I'm not trying to say that all corporations should never have an interest in education, but it should be mixed of goals of immediate market needs. What are the immediate market needs for education? So how do we train people to get into this capitalistic society that we all buy into? Then think about short-term market demand. So 10 years out, we know that we're going to need X amount of engineers. So how can we ensure that we have a diverse working force that can compete with a global economy to fulfill some of these demands? It's pretty straightforward. But another aspect that I have not heard in any of the discourse or any of these so-called research that they call, or the plan itself, is this lifelong learner, or these critical thinking. One aspect of education which has traditionally, both public schools historically, have never really been able to answer or solve is the idea of creating a generation, not even creating, but helping our children be able to solve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. And that's where those critical thinking skills, adaptability, soft social skills come into play that make a very dynamic leader or make a dynamic citizen to make those decisions to drive a better change and a better future. But those standardized tests, the 8F scale, none of that is included in that. That's what a good learner is. That's what a good high quality education is. But I don't see that in any of these plans. And lastly, I would like to end with this. After doing a couple presentations, folks decided that they should lie on me, say that I stole something, intimidate me by calling my dean or even the chancellor of my university. But let's be clear, even though you have a collar around your neck, I am free. No one pulls my strings. I went through training and education that made me a critical researcher to investigate and interrogate what is before me. That's what I'm trained to do. No one is my master. No one is going to tell me not to speak the truth. I am free, and I'm not scared of you. I'm not scared of you, your money, or the power you believe you have. I am free. Truth will shine in the deepest dark, and the struggle will continue. Prison, persecution, and intimidation does not scare me. I am an agent of truth, and this is just the beginning. Thank you.